It's a sunny day here in Toronto, and I'm in the 2020 Mercedes-AMG GT R. And the R, well, that stands for rage. Let me explain. First of all, listen to that. This is in quiet mode, of course. This thing idles like a 440 Chrysler. And then if you press the mean button for the exhaust, well, then it really sounds angry. So let's put it in drive and find out what makes this just so angry. Up front is a hand-assembled AMG 4-liter twin-turbo V8. What does it do? It does this. That, if you couldn't tell, is what 577 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque will do to a 3,700 pound projectile. Is it fast? Absolutely. 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds and a top speed of 198 miles per hour. Those are huge numbers. But you notice the 0 to 60 time isn't actually, well, that fast considering how hard-edged and crazy this car is. That's because this car is basically showing us the limitations of the front engine rear drive layout. For example, Mercedes will sell you an SUV that will nearly match this car at 60 miles an hour. A 5-passenger SUV. But to see about that 198 mile per hour top speed, that this car has a lot of top end, and certainly once it is hooking, you are booking. This thing moves out. Which brings me to my next point, which is that it kind of wants to murder you. This thing has huge rear tires. They are 325 section rears and 275 sections up front. But they are still not big enough to contain all the torque and power that this V8 produces. It gets squirrely even if you stab it near highway speeds. It is a lot of power and it likes to move around. It has a 9-position traction control switch, which basically are labeled death, more death, and absolute death if you're playing with this knob on the street, which I don't recommend you really do. If you're an expert driver or if you're on a racetrack, it sounds like great fun. But I'm not a great driver and I am not on a racetrack, so I'm leaving that firmly parked in the on position. I have had a few close calls in this car, and close calls are not what you want in a car that costs this much. How much? Well, in Canada, the AMG GT R starts at $190,400. This one, as you see it, has a lot of very pricey options, which send that price well north of $200,000, including 2 carbon fiber packages. I would think that something called the R would give me a bunch of carbon fiber standard, and while you do get the carbon fiber roof as standard, a lot of other stuff has to be bought, including the front splitter, the side skirts, the rear diffuser, the rear spoiler, and the cool little blades that go over the engine vents. I don't know what else you would really call them. There's also a matte carbon fiber package in this interior, which dresses up the vents and the center console, and in another $1,800 actually, carbon fiber rear luggage brace. So all that carbon fiber add-on to this car is basically $12,000 of carbon fiber stuff. It looks really cool, especially up against this pearl white paint job. White would not be my first pick for a hard-edge track car, supercar thing, but it works here. I like it. You can also get it in booger snot green or sunburst yellow. Both are, of course, Mercedes official colors for $9,500. The booger green is like a cool matte color, and it's probably the one you've seen because it was painted on the record-breaking car. This car did do an impressive Nürburgring time that I actually can't remember. It's this time. Other interesting options this car has are the really cool forged AMG wheels. They're 19 inches up front and 20 inches out back, and they've even machined the spokes to make these wheels as light as possible, and frankly to just look cool with that machined lip and the black spokes. Another extra cost option on this car. So let's talk about where this fits in the Mercedes-AMG GT lineup. This is the R, and below it is the S, which is kind of more comfortable, less power, obviously less expensive. And above that technically is a GT R Pro, but it's a super limited edition one. They're sold out. I don't even see it on the website, so it kind of exists in spirit only. So really, if you were to walk into a Mercedes dealership and hand them a wad of cash, this is really the fastest car they would sell you. This is the most hard-edged thing Mercedes will sell, which is pretty cool. But you have to wonder what it's actually for. It's way too much for street use. There are faster cars, which are better on the street, and there are more powerful cars, like the Hellcat, which are better on the street. But this thing is so hard edged, even in comfort mode, which is basically just like less painful mode. The suspension is staggeringly stiff. It's a very rigid car, and I'm sure it worked great on a smooth racetrack where I am not. But on the street, even the smallest of dips and undulations and pavement irregularities will upset this car, which is, again, not what you want when you have 577 horsepower in a very expensive car. It's very nervous. This car is, look at the steering geometry. It is built to attack. The turn-in is so sharp, it's so crisp, it is ready to go. And if you're on a big racetrack with a lot of runoff, it must be awesome. But on the street, I really wish I was in the GTS version. But that said, it is really nice to just be able to do this whenever you want. So what else could you buy for $190,000? Well, also playing in this really great price bracket are things like the Audi R8, which is all-wheel drive, very practical, and more visually striking than this car because it's mid-engine. And you also have what I think most people are really cross-shopping this with, which is the Porsche 911 GT3, which is a track-focused version of what is ostensibly a sports car, just like the AMG GT R. The GT3 is way more genteel than this thing. This thing has so much rock and roll compared to the GT3. The GT3 is technically an impeccable car. It has a perfect transmission, it drives just really well, but you know what it's lacking? Punk rock. This thing has it. This is cool. It's loud, it's burbly. Our David Booth thinks it is basically an AMG Camaro, and you know what? He's kind of right. It's cool. People look at it, people like it. This thing is definitely the wilder choice if you were debating between a GT3 and one of these. Ultimately, I don't think it's as good, you know, as a track car or as a fast street car than GT3. But it really depends what you want. The party trick of the GT3 is that when you drive it slowly, it kind of just drives like a regular car. Whereas this thing never stops. It's crazy all the time. So really, it depends what you want from your high-dollar supercar sports car. If you want a car to be looked at and a car that's visually striking and that makes you feel like you're driving something wild every time, you know, really, the Audi R8 is right up there, and being that it's mid-engine, it's going to feel a bit more special because this is still a front-engine rear-drive car, and it kind of feels a lot like a C7 Corvette to drive. I mean, it's low, it has a long hood, I sit right on the back axle. It's obviously much nicer in here, and it's a Mercedes, but it feels a lot like a C7 Corvette. And if you're looking for a real track car, I mean, a GT3 is probably the way to go. In summary, the AMG GT R is kind of a wild man car. It's got lots of power, it likes to slide around, it's loud, and it's exciting. And if you're tired of easy listening, maybe it's time you tried some punk rock. For Driving.ca, I'm Clayton Seams.